All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're diving into something you might not have heard of yet, but it's got a lot of people talking. It's called Geranylgeraniol, or GG for short.
Yep.
It's a natural compound, and it seems like it's popping up more and more in nutritional science.
Yeah.
There's some really fascinating research, especially when it comes to hormonal health, specifically testosterone, and maybe even some potential benefits for inflammation.
For sure. For sure. You know, for a long time, Gigi, it was kind of just seen as this like background player in how our cells do their thing.
Right.
You know, it's really important for what's called the mevalonate pathway.
Right.
Kind of think of it as like the central hub where our bodies build all these essential molecules.
Gotcha. Okay.
And it's also key for something called protein prenylation. It's a mouthful.
Yeah.
But basically, it helps all these molecules actually do their jobs right,
Yeah.
you know, within our cells and even in our mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of the cells.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got this compound that's working behind the scenes, so to speak. Right.
But what is making it grab headlines now? What's so special about all the new research that's coming out?
I think it's really the emerging research, especially as we were talking about before when it comes to testosterone. There was this study this year, an 8-week study that was published in Nutraceuticals, and it's got everyone talking.
Okay, so this study, what did it actually look at? Who was involved? You know, paint us a picture.
Yeah, so this was a pretty solid study. It was randomized. They had a placebo group, so it was placebo-controlled. And they had 66 adults in it. They were all between 30 and 49 years old. And basically, they took either a placebo or they took GG. And they started off with 150 milligrams of GG every day for 4 weeks, and then they upped it to 300 milligrams a day for another 4 weeks.
Okay, so 8 weeks total. So for our listeners, what's the key takeaway? What should they know about what this study actually found? I think here's where it starts to get really interesting. So in the study that started with testosterone levels below 700 nanograms per deciliter, and that's actually, as guys age, that's a pretty common range to be in. But for those guys, the group that took the GG, they saw some really impressive increases.
Yeah, so what kind of numbers are we talking here? Like, what's considered impressive in this context?
Like, we're talking on average, their total testosterone went up by 7.5%. Their free testosterone went up by 15%.
Yeah.
And their bioavailable testosterone went up by almost 15% as well.
Okay.
So pretty significant.
Yeah, that's substantial. I mean, that could make a real difference for, like you said, men as they're aging and maybe seeing those levels dip a little bit.
Yeah.
What about the others in the study? So the people who had testosterone levels that were maybe not in that below 700 range, or the women in the study, did they see any benefit?
Yeah. And that's, I think, the really important point is the researchers, they didn't see any really significant hormonal changes in the women or the guys who started off with higher testosterone.
Okay.
So it does seem like, at least from this study, that GG might be more effective for those who have lower testosterone levels to start with.
Okay, so maybe more targeted. So it's not for everyone, but for some people, it could be really useful.
Potentially, yeah. And I think the other good news is that the study also reported that GG seemed to be really well tolerated.
Okay, great. So we've talked a lot about testosterone, but it sounds like the benefits of GG, they might not stop there. I know that there's some promising research, at least early research, looking at a connection to inflammation as well.
Exactly.
And specifically with a condition called Hyper-IgD Syndrome, or HID.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful.
Yeah, it is a bit of a mouthful. So can you tell us a little bit about what HIDs is and what this early research has shown about GG's potential role there?
Sure. So HIDs, it's a rare genetic disorder. And basically, people who have it have issues with an enzyme called mevalonate kinase.
Okay.
And it causes these like recurring episodes of fever and inflammation. And it can be really debilitating.
Wow.
So there was a small pilot study. It only involved 3 patients.
Okay.
But they took 150 milligrams of GG every day for 3 months. And what's really interesting is, again, it seems like the GG was tolerated really well. And the researchers, they did what's called proteomic analysis. It's basically where they look at all the proteins in the body.
Okay.
And it suggested that GG might actually be helping to reverse these disease-specific protein expression patterns.
Wow. Okay.
So basically what that means is that it could be helping to kind of like counteract the effects of the disease at a molecular level.
Yeah, so basically it's looking like GG could be playing an anti-inflammatory role.
Exactly.
Interesting.
But yeah, we have to say, you know, it is early days.
Sure.
It's a very small study.
Yeah.
But the results are definitely encouraging.
Yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
So we're seeing these effects. We're talking about the effects on testosterone and now with HIDs and inflammation. But how is this all actually happening? What's the mechanism? How is GG working in the body to create these benefits?
So scientists are still trying to piece that all together.
Sure.
But some preclinical studies, so these are basically lab studies,
Right.
they suggest that GG actually can directly stimulate testosterone production at the cellular level. So there were studies using I-10 cells. These are cells that are derived from the testes. And they found that GG activates this pathway in the cell. It's called a KMP protein kinase, a signaling pathway.
Okay. And I know that's kind of a mouthful for people who aren't, immersed in this world. So in simple terms, what does that pathway actually do? Why is it important?
I think a good way to think about it is it's kind of like a signal booster for hormone production.
Okay.
So in these lab studies, when the GG activated this pathway, it basically told the cells, hey, start making more progesterone.
Okay.
And crucially, testosterone. So this gives us at least a starting point for understanding why we're seeing these increases in testosterone in the human studies.
Yeah.
It seems like GG might be kind of flipping this switch in the body.
Yeah, like directly impacting the production of those hormones.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating. So it sounds like there's a lot of potential here, but obviously more research is needed. What's next? What's on the horizon for GG research? Where do we go from here?
Well, there's a big clinical trial that's in the works right now, an 18-week trial.
Oh, wow.
It's a crossover study. It's placebo-controlled.
Okay.
So it'll be really interesting to see what they find. And it's going to be looking at GG's effects on testosterone in both men and women this time.
Interesting.
So they're expanding it. And they're looking at people who are between 40 and 65 years old.
Okay, great.
It's kind of a different age range than that first study that we talked about.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think they started recruiting yet,
Okay.
but just the fact that this trial is happening, I think shows that there's a lot of scientific interest in GG.
Yeah, definitely. So to wrap things up for our listeners today, what are the kind of key takeaways from our deep dive into geranylgeraniol?
Sure.
What should they walk away knowing about this compound?
Well, I think the main takeaway is that GG, it shows some real promise, potentially for boosting testosterone in men who have lower levels.
Right.
And it may also offer some hope for people who have inflammatory conditions like Hyper-IgD syndrome, which we talked about.
Right.
The initial human studies are really positive.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah. But of course, more research is always needed.
Yeah.
And it's on the horizon.
Always needed, but definitely some interesting things to look forward to. So to leave our listeners with a thought, given these early findings and all this new research that's coming out, all these investigations into how GG works and all these potential benefits, where do you see this going? How could compounds like GG, these naturally occurring compounds, how could they play a bigger role in kind of our approach to health in the future?
It's a great question, and it's something that I think a lot of people in the field are thinking about right now. We've got all these pharmaceutical drugs for so many different conditions.
Right.
But what if we could kind of harness the power of these natural compounds like GG that already exist in nature? Maybe they can be used alongside those drugs, or maybe even in some cases instead of, if they're safe and effective.
Right. Preventatively.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
For prevention or for just general well-being. I think that's something that's really worth exploring, and I think it's an area that's going to be kind of exploding in the next few years. So it's something to watch for sure.
Definitely an area to keep an eye on. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. We'll be back next week with another deep dive into the cutting edge of health and science.